I'm with David Munshine of the Munshine Group here because I read about his business, and a lot of big companies do an awful lot for nonprofits and for charities, but it's part of what they do. David's business serves exclusively nonprofit organizations. He's a marketing and fundraising firm. His only clients are nonprofits. Is that right?
That's right, Joe.
What a great thing.
We think so, yes.
How's business?
Business is terrific. Knock on wood. We're very, very fortunate.
Where's the demand coming from for you? Who's coming to you?
Well, we work in all of the major nonprofit subsectors. So that means that we've worked with clients who are in higher education, colleges and universities, hospitals and healthcare systems, also independent schools, as well as arts and culture. We get a lot of calls from human services organizations. So it's really a diverse mix.
So what do you do for all these people who are trying to do well?
Well, there are many projects that relate to capital campaigns. That's really the big transformational signature project of a fundraising consulting firm. We are more than just a fundraising consulting firm. As you noted, we're also a communications firm, and we also help clients with strategy and implementation. So we may hear from clients when they have major initiatives such as a building campaign or something where they're really looking to take things to the next level.
Are capital campaigns usually a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, or no?
Yes, it depends.
Yeah, right.
So small organizations, 2 to 3 years is generally the time frame. Larger, more complex institutions, those hospitals, healthcare systems, and universities, you're easily looking at a 7 to 10-year campaign.
How do you keep it going for even 3 or 5 years?
Well, it requires many, many things, including plans to give volunteers, right, which are the essential ingredient in capital campaigns. We have to give the volunteers a great experience, and we have to give them an experience that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if you're talking about a campaign that'll last the better part of the decade, you should plan in advance that you're going to have to turn over and expand and augment that initial leadership group.
Do some clients say, oh, we never thought of that?
Sure, sure. The other thing I would say...
Well, you called the right place. Right? I mean, yeah.
The other thing I would say is that half or more of the campaign will be in what's called the quiet phase or the silent phase. So that is a different allocation of resources. Capital campaign will provide 90% plus of the funds from 10% or fewer of the donors. So there's a lot of work in the background before you get to the big community phase.
So the quiet phase, what would you do to help them quietly in the quiet phase? Coach them on how to ask for money?
Yes, that's a big part of it. But prior to that, we say campaigns are won or lost in the planning. So there are a few different planning stages before you really get down to the business of asking for money and reaching out to increasing numbers of prospective donors. So we'll typically start with some sort of a feasibility or campaign planning study.
So you have long-term clients.
We do. That's part of the reason why business is good. We have, as a professional services firm, we have a combination where there are typically a few large, long-term projects, multiple-year projects, and then we have a series of short-term engagements. You could have a 6-week development and communications assessment and social media audit. You could have a project to do a board retreat or a training workshop, and everything in between. We get a lot of calls, which we love, repeat calls from clients. We've done a number of communications projects for some clients, and they love the unified brand look that we work with them to establish. So it just makes sense once they get into a good rhythm with us that they're going to pick up the phone and call us again.
How do you train board members and volunteers to ask people they know for money, for whatever the cause is?
Well,
what do you tell them?
Well, one of the things that we tell them is not to focus on how they feel when they ask for money, but rather to focus on how they feel when they give money. Americans lead the world in generosity, so it feels good to give. And we need to remind volunteers that because otherwise they tend to get gripped by fear or anxiety or procrastination.
About asking someone for money.
Sure.
So they're going to think now, maybe I'll make this I'll help this person feel good about supporting Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Absolutely, absolutely. And rather than just focusing on the institution's needs, the best fundraising conversations will focus on the donor's needs and where they line up, right? So how we can help a donor fulfill their objectives, whether it's for larger scale philanthropy or the simple act of making a contribution to help a nonprofit keep the lights on.
There's a campaign that comes to mind that you did that you were happy with and that you point to with pride.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm going to talk about one of the smaller projects because just like the volunteers need to have a beginning and a middle and an end, we as consultants, you know, especially these days, nonprofits tend to be professionally staffed. They have their own in-house talent. And because of the internet, we're in the information economy, the knowledge economy, it used to be the case that the consultant would come in and maybe take up residence in the nonprofit's office space and really be fully embedded, sometimes even on a full-time basis. Nowadays, the consultant may be needed for pieces or for that planning and the quiet phase. So to see a campaign all the way through, we did a campaign a few years ago for a great nonprofit theater company in Hoboken called Mile Square Theater. And Mile Square Theater was operating in a black box 110-seat space without a lease in an art center in town. And they lost the opportunity to continue to perform there. And there was a new opportunity uptown in a new building, which was residential condos, and they had the opportunity to take the retail spot. So there, we had to do a relatively quick, right, because this organization is not getting operating income from their performances. So we had to do a relatively quick campaign. It started at $500,000, and then when we really got in and started working with them and started looking at the numbers, it came much closer to being $1 million campaign, and that was very successful. We took a lot of pride in it, first of all, because I had previously lived in Hoboken, so I knew some of the people who were involved personally, and also because this particular client needed help with more than just the fundraising piece, and even more than just the fundraising and the communications. And so it was an early opportunity for me to test the theory of our firm and our 4 buckets of service. So we got very involved. I got personally involved in helping them to secure construction financing from a local community bank. BCB Bank was terrific in that particular case. And without that, they would have had to wait up to 5 years to collect all of the pledges that they'd raised in this capital campaign.
So your 4 buckets of service, I like the phrase. What are your 4 buckets of service?
Fundraising, communications, strategy, and implementation.
You said in this case you helped them get a loan. Which bucket is that into, or is that a new bucket?
Strategy and implementation. Those buckets often go together.
You're a real planner. When you said strategy and implementation, you smiled. I've never seen anybody smile at that phrase. Hey, are you an accountant?
No, but I'm married to one.
Because you're so organized and methodical about this. Well, I can see why clients need you, because they can get all hopped up about the cause or the budget or 800 different things.
Well, I credit my team, my staff at the Munshine Group, for a lot of that organization and a lot of that follow-through, and for keeping me organized. You have to have a certain temperament to be able to change subject matters throughout the day, throughout the week, and continue to compartmentalize and have the proper command of each organization's details, because from one nonprofit to the next, uniqueness is the rule.
How do you do that, David, compartmentalize between all these projects? What's worked for you?
Well, I think it's just, you know, you can have energy in a business setting, and too much energy without another crucial ingredient, which is focus, can run rampant and you're all over the place. So I just try to stay grounded and focused and just keep coming back to, you know, what do I need to be worried about at this moment in time.
Where do you take the business from here? Could you have more clients if you hired more employees, if you could find them? Is demand, how's demand?
Demand is pretty good. So we have a pipeline, and some probably the most important piece of the pipeline is those multi-year projects. We may have a 3-year campaign. We may be engaged a year at a time. So the opportunity to renew the client base when those contracts and projects turn over is very important. But at any particular time, we'll have a pipeline that's about equal to the size of the client base. And those opportunities can take months to come to fruition or not. And sometimes it's the ones that call you and they are really hot to trot, and then you get in there and you talk to them and realize that as an outsider, you can bring that fresh perspective.
Right.
And sometimes those circumstances will change during the sales process. I think that scoping out what the client's needs are and not taking it for face value, that what they tell you in the first call, first of all, there's multiple stakeholders at every nonprofit organization. So the person you're talking to will have an important perspective, but it's one person's perspective much of the time. So really, the other scenario is the clients who tell us that they have a much longer process, but they're getting ahead of the game and so forth. And sometimes those are the organizations that will call you and want you to start on the first of the month.